The moment I turned onto the gravel drive and saw Eleanor standing in the barn doorway, clutching a wad of cash and grinning like she'd just saved the world, I knew something had gone horribly wrong. That smile, tight, triumphant, and just a little too proud, had only one meaning. She had taken it upon herself to fix something that wasn't hers to fix. "Delia," she called, waving the money in the air like a game show prize. "Just in time. I've got fabulous news." I parked my dusty Ford Ranger beside the pasture fence and stepped out slowly, eyes locked on the wide, empty space in the barn, the spot where my car had sat for the past 5 years. A bare concrete slab stared back at me, just a faint oil ring and the ghost of tire marks. "Where's the charger?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Eleanor's grin widened. "Sold it. Finally got that eyesore off your hands. A young man came this morning. He seemed thrilled. I got $2,500, 0 cents cash." My throat tightened. "You sold my 1969 Dodge Charger?" She nodded eagerly. "You should be thanking me. That thing was ancient, Delia. You're 43 years old. It was time to let go of childish toys. Honestly, it was embarrassing watching you pour hours into some old hunk of metal." I blinked. 5 years of weekends, scraped knuckles, and late-night deep dives into vintage Mopar schematics. All gone. "It wasn't just a car," I said slowly. "It was a matching numbers R/T440. I spent 5 years restoring it. Original paint code, era-correct interior. That car was worth at least $180,000, 0 cents. Eleanor scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. It didn't even have Bluetooth." I stepped forward. "Who did you sell it to?" She tilted her chin proudly. "Some polite young man from Billings. Said he'd been dreaming of owning a project car like this. I warned him it needed work, but he didn't seem to mind. Honestly, Delia, he was charming. Helped me move all those greasy old tools out too. He even offered to haul them away for free." I froze. "You gave him the tool chests too?" "Well, they were just taking up space. I figured you could use that area for something more productive. Maybe finally try pottery. Or baking." I looked at her like I was seeing her for the first time. "You gave away my grandfather's tools, his snap-on sets, the ones from his days building drag racers. Some of those were one of a kind." Eleanor had the decency to falter for half a second. "Oh, don't be so sentimental. Do you at least have documentation of the sale?" I asked. "Of course I do," she said with a huff, pulling a wrinkled paper from her purse. "I'm not irresponsible." She handed me the bill of sale, a hastily written note on lined paper, with a name I didn't recognize and a phone number written in pencil. My fingers clenched around it. She thought she'd cleaned out a mess, but she didn't know that inside the trunk, behind the finished panels and under lock and key, was the real treasure. The original build sheets. And something else. Something no one but me and my grandfather had ever known was in there. And that young man? He'd just inherited a time bomb. And Eleanor had no idea what she'd really done. "Here's the bill of sale. Everything's perfectly legal," Eleanor said, thrusting the paper into my hand like it sealed her genius. I took it with steady fingers, though inside I was cataloging just how catastrophically she had dismantled something irreplaceable. The bill of sale was scrawled on a sheet of torn notebook paper, signed in barely readable handwriting. No printed names, no ID numbers, no vehicle title attached, no address, no driver's license. "This young man," I asked, voice calm, "did he show you his ID, leave a phone number, a copy of the title?" Eleanor waved a hand. "Oh, Delia, he paid cash. That's what matters. It's not like he's stealing it. It's a junker. And now you have a few thousand to put toward something practical, maybe a Subaru or a nice set of patio furniture." I folded the paper slowly and slid it into the pocket of my flannel shirt. "You know what, Eleanor?" I said with a smile that felt like steel in my teeth. "You're right. Thank you for taking care of that for me." Her expression flickered, just for a second. She had expected an argument, a meltdown, anything to validate her interference. Not gratitude. "Well," she said, visibly thrown, "you're welcome." I just want what's best for you, dear. I know Mark will be relieved. Maybe now you can focus on healthier interests. That yoga class in town seemed nice. Mark, my husband of 6 years. The one who gave Eleanor a garage key, just in case, and never got around to changing the locks. The one who said he admired my dedication, but couldn't understand why I was more interested in torque specs than pedicures. The one on a week-long corporate retreat in Denver. I'm sure he'll be thrilled, I said coolly. Then I pulled out my phone. Eleanor, would you mind waiting here a moment? I just need to make a quick call. Of course, she said, still beaming as she counted and recounted the bills. I'll tidy this place up a bit. Maybe sweep. I walked to the far end of the barn where the Wi-Fi was strongest, turned my back to her, and dialed a number I knew by heart. Detective Martinez. Carmen, it's Delia. A pause. Delia? What's going on? I need to report a theft. Carmen Martinez had been my friend since undergrad. She studied criminal justice, I studied mechanical engineering. We shared late-night coffees and buried stress. She was now a detective in Bozeman PD, and she knew exactly what that Charger meant to me. What happened? Someone sold my '69 Charger without my permission. No title, no ID, just gone. There was a silence heavy with shared history. You mean the Charger? She asked. The one I've been prepping for Barrett Jackson next spring. Carmen let out a slow whistle. That car's worth a small house. $2,500 0 cash, I said flatly. Sold it this morning. Jesus, Delia, who did it? My mother-in-law. The silence stretched again. Carmen wasn't just imagining the car. She was picturing the years, the restorations, the photo updates I'd sent her after every milestone. She had access to the garage, I continued. She thought she was helping me by getting rid of my junk. Didn't even get a bill of sale with ID. A sharp exhale. Okay. I'll walk you through the next steps, but Delia? Yeah, we're getting that car back. $2,500 0, I muttered, for a matching number's '69 Charger R/T. Eleanor listed it on Craigslist as a project car needing work. This has to be one of the most expensive mistakes in Montana's automotive history. What do you need from me? Carmen asked, voice sharp with focus now. You said there's a bill of sale? Sort of. It's handwritten, no real info, just a first name and a phone number that might be fake. I'll text you what I've got. Send it. I'll see what I can dig up. Thanks, Carmen, I said. I know you understand what that car meant. I looked across the barn. Eleanor was still there, reorganizing my socket sets like a toddler sorting crayons, by color, not by size. My hands itched to stop her, but instead, I forced a smile and ended the call. I typed out everything from the so-called bill of sale, D. Johnson, a disconnected phone number, and a street address that might as well have been a placeholder. Then I hit send. I walked back toward Eleanor, who had now moved on to stacking wire brushes next to sanding blocks. All taken care of, I said, voice syrupy sweet. Now why don't you head on home? Mark will be back from Denver tomorrow night, and I'm sure he'll love hearing all about your successful sale. She chuckled, scooping her purse into the crook of her elbow. You'll thank me later, dear. It's better this way. Trust me. With that, she breezed out of the barn like a woman who had just done the world a favor. When she was gone, I stood there in the silence. Just me and the smell of oil and iron. The empty space on the concrete floor looked like a scar. 4 years of labor. 4 years of pouring myself into that car, tracking down original parts from scrapyards in 3 states, learning how to MIG weld with tutorials and trial runs, spending weekends in this very barn fabricating mounts and aligning the drive shaft. But sometime, there was only the best coffee cup. That Charger was more than a car. It was a connection to my grandfather, the man who taught me how to hold a torque wrench, and who left me this land and this barn when he passed. To Eleanor, it was a pile of steel. To me, it was a symphony in chrome and horsepower. The next morning, Carmen called. Her voice was clipped. The name's fake. David Johnson doesn't exist. The phone number's a burner, the address, a UPS drop box in Missoula. Professional flipper? I asked, already knowing. Most likely, she said. He probably checks Craigslist daily for undervalued classics, buys fast, sells faster, doesn't stick around. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair at the engineering firm where I worked as a senior consultant. Outside the window, the Bitterroot Mountains loomed in the distance. Whether the car's gone? Maybe not. I'm calling a few folks in the collector community. Auction houses, restoration garages, VIN trackers. If it turns up, I'll know. Thanks, Carmen. I owe you big. Just promise me one thing, she said, voice softening. When you build your next one, let me ride shotgun. That afternoon, I was in a client review meeting discussing stress tolerances on bridge girders when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark. Mom told me about the car, probably for the best. Maybe now we can use the barn for storage like normal people. I stared at the screen for a long time before sliding the phone face down across the table. Storage, like normal people. He had no idea what was coming next. If you've ever had something stolen right out from under you, especially by someone who claimed it was for your own good, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens when Delia decides it's her turn to take control. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I placed the phone face down on the table and turned my focus back to the meeting. Some conversations were too important to have over text. Mark arrived the next evening with his usual whirlwind energy, suitcase dropped near the door, shoes kicked off mid-stride, tie already loose by the time he stepped into the kitchen. Delia, you should have seen the look on the client's face when I showed them our updated projections, he said, gesturing animatedly, as if still in the boardroom. They practically signed on the spot. That's great, I said, calmly stirring pasta sauce over the stove. How was your flight? Delayed, he sighed, grabbing a bottled water, but first class cushions the blow. He leaned in and kissed my cheek absently, already opening the fridge again. Mom told me about the car. Honestly, I'm relieved. That thing was becoming a real obsession. I didn't flinch, just stirred. Is that how you saw it? Mark chuckled. Come on, Delia. Every Saturday, every Sunday, you were in that barn. It was like being married to a grease monkey. Now we can actually do something useful with that space. Maybe set up a home gym or get some proper storage going. I turned, setting the spoon gently on the counter. Your mother sold my car without my permission. She was trying to help, he replied quickly. You know, Mom. Always looking out for the family. He cracked open a beer and leaned against the counter, totally unaware that I was studying him like I was seeing him for the first time. Besides, $2,500, 0 cents. Not bad for a car that old. We could use it for a vacation, something we both enjoy. I stared at him. That car was worth over $180,000, 0 cents. Mark paused mid-sip. It was a 1969 Dodge Charger, R/T, numbers matching, restored to factory specs with my own hands. I was preparing it for auction in Arizona this spring. The blood drained from his face. You never told me it was worth that much. You never asked, I said. In 6 years, not once did you ask what I was building. You just joked about the oil stains on my clothes. You wanted me out of the garage, not because of the car, but because it was mine. He stared, slack-jawed. Your mother didn't sell a junker, I continued. She committed theft. Silence stretched between us as reality began to dawn on him, but I didn't wait for an apology. I turned back to the stove and lowered the heat. Dinner's ready in 10. She sold property that wasn't hers to a stranger who gave her a fake name and a burner phone for a tenth of what it was worth. Mark set his beer on the counter with trembling hands. Can we get it back? I don't know, I replied, my voice flat. The police are involved now, but the buyer used a false identity and address, probably a professional who scouts Craigslist for clueless sellers. He ran his fingers through his hair. Oh, God, what are we going to do? I looked at him, for the first time since coming home to find Eleanor fanning herself with stolen cash. And I smiled. Not politely, not with restraint. Something colder. We aren't doing anything, I said. I will continue working with the police to recover my property. You will sit down with your mother and explain, very clearly, that she committed a crime, and if she ever touches my things again, the next conversation will be with the prosecutor. The next morning, I got a call that shifted everything. Delia, Carmen's voice was breathless with excitement. I found it. Your car. I stepped into my office and closed the door. Where? Stale, a collector named James Morrison bought it from a dealer yesterday. He paid $250,000, 0 cents. I sank into my chair. That's over half what it's worth fully restored, I muttered. Yep. Dealer probably pitched it as almost finished, but here's the good news. Morrison isn't some flipper. He's legit. When I explained everything, he was horrified. He's cooperating. What does that mean exactly? It means we can prove the chain of custody. Morrison has the purchase record from the dealer. The dealer has documentation from David Johnson. Your mystery man. And we've got Eleanor's handwritten bill of sale, which makes it a clear case of theft. Exactly. Morrison's insurance will cover his loss. The dealer's scrambling to avoid charges and is fully cooperating. Scottsdale PD is on it. I closed my eyes and exhaled. So we can get it back? We can get it back. It's being held as evidence for now. But it's safe. It took everything I had not to cry right then. That night, I called a family meeting. Mark sat across from me at the dining room table, pale and worn. Eleanor swept in 10 minutes late, all pearls and perfume, still wearing the self-satisfied air of someone who believed she deserved thanks. I don't understand why we need a formal meeting, she said, taking a seat with a theatrical sigh. I already explained everything to Mark. You did, I said calmly, folding my hands on the table. And now, you're going to hear the rest. I sold that old car for a very reasonable price, Eleanor huffed, crossing her arms like the matter was settled. Eleanor, I said calmly, locking eyes with her, you need to understand something very important. That car you sold, it was worth $400,000, 0 cents. She blinked, her smugness faltering. Don't be ridiculous, Delia. It was just an old car. No. It was a 1969 Dodge Charger R/T, numbers matching. One of the most valuable muscle cars in American automotive history. I spent the last 4 years restoring it, completely to show-level condition. Her confidence cracked. That's impossible, she muttered. It looked like junk. The paint was dull. There were parts on the floor, tools everywhere. That's because restoration is a process, I said, already pulling out my tablet. What you saw was a car mid-assembly. What you sold was a nearly completed masterpiece. I tapped the screen and turned it to face her. This is what it looked like when I found it. The first photo showed the Charger as it sat in a collapsed barn outside Helena, rusted, missing half its panels, the interior gutted. A ghost of a legend. Eleanor scoffed. It's the car. It was a wreck. I swiped to the next image. Here's after the media blasting. The chassis stripped, sealed, and primed. Every weld reworked, every line restored. Another swipe. This is the engine bay. My grandfather's tools laid out as I rebuilt the original 440 Magnum block. Piece by piece. Every gasket, every bolt, torqued to spec. Her face paled with each photo. I kept going. The interior, hand-stitched leather seats using the original patterns. Recalibrated gauges. The dash, rebuilt to exact 69 factory layout. Look at the finish. Look at the care. I paused on the final photo. The car, fully reassembled. Flawless paint, chrome polish to a mirror. Tires period correct. A time capsule. This, I said softly, is what you sold for $2,500, 0 cents. She stared at the screen like it might bite her. It looked, I didn't think. You didn't ask, I cut in. You assumed. You saw something you didn't understand and threw it away. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly in her lap. Mark sat frozen beside her, staring at the photos like they were crime scene evidence. The young man who bought it? I continued. He wasn't a sweet enthusiast looking for a project. He was a professional car thief who preys on sellers who don't understand value. He gave you a fake name and address. He's done this before. A thief? Mark's voice cracked. A burner phone. A drop address in Missoula. Scottsdale PD traced the sale through 2 more hands. And now? The car is in a secure facility, held as evidence. I looked between them. You didn't just sell a car, I said, voice low and even. You enabled a felony. You handed him everything he needed on a silver platter and then smiled while doing it. The police think he's done this before, I said, keeping my voice even. He targets estate sales, family feuds, and helpful relatives who think Craigslist is a community bulletin board. Eleanor sat frozen, staring at the photos on my tablet. Her mouth was slightly open. $400,000 0 cents, she whispered. That's what it was worth, I said. And they found it. A collector in Scottsdale bought it from a dealer for $250,000, 0 cents. He's cooperating. He's horrified, actually. So, we can get it back? She asked, hope flickering. I can get it back, I corrected. But you need to understand something else. Something serious. She blinked at me. What you did wasn't just a mistake. It was theft. You sold property that didn't belong to you. Eleanor looked like she'd been slapped. The district attorney's office is reviewing the case now, I continued. They're considering criminal charges. The silence that followed felt like the air had been sucked from the room. Eleanor looked from me to Mark, then back to the glowing screen in front of her. Criminal charges? She croaked. In this state, theft of property over $100,000, 0 cents is a first-degree felony, I said quietly. The minimum sentence is 2 years in prison. Mark let out a shuddered breath and buried his face in his hands. Mom, what did you do? I was trying to help, Eleanor stammered. Her voice had none of the confidence she usually wore like a badge. I thought it was just taking up space. You thought you knew better than I did about my own life, I said. No anger in my tone, just truth. You decided my work wasn't worthy, that my passions were childish, so you took it upon yourself to erase them. Tears had started falling down her cheeks, mascara trailing like ink. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll pay you back. With what? I said. You have $2,500, 0 cents. The room was dead still. The car was worth $400,000, 0 cents. We'll figure something out, Mark said desperately. Maybe we could take out a loan or... No, I said, slicing through his panic with calm finality. You need to be very clear about something. I looked at both of them. Your mother committed a felony. This isn't about money. It's not something you fix with good intentions and an installment plan. This was a theft that affected multiple jurisdictions and triggered a multi-agency investigation. The only reason you're sitting here and not in a holding cell is because I asked the DA to hold off while we sort through the civil side. The next 2 weeks were quiet, but charged. As the investigation moved forward and attorneys began filing paperwork, the atmosphere in our home changed. Mark, for the first time, started to see me. Really see me. He'd spent years downplaying my skills, brushing them off as a cute hobby because it was easier than challenging the dynamics he grew up with. Easier than facing the reality that his wife was something he didn't fully understand. An engineer. A craftsperson, a woman who had quietly built something beautiful and valuable. With her own 2 hands. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen island, he spoke for the first time in hours. I never realized, he said softly, just how much you knew, or what that car really meant. I mean, I knew you were good with cars, Mark said that evening, his voice uncertain. But I didn't understand. No, I said quietly. You didn't want to understand. It was easier to call it a quirky hobby than to admit I might be an expert in something you knew nothing about. The legal process wrapped up faster than I expected. True to Carmen's word, James Morrison, the collector in Scottsdale, was every bit the decent man she described. Shocked by what had happened, he cooperated fully, offering access to everything from transport logs to dealer records. The dealer, in turn, agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. The money trail led to a man connected to a larger ring that specialized in flipping stolen classic cars. He'd done this before, and now he wouldn't be doing it again. Eleanor, facing felony charges, stood before the consequences she never imagined would come from helping. In the end, she accepted a plea agreement, 5 years of probation, restitution payments, and community service. But the damage to our family wasn't something any sentence could repair. Mark and I entered marriage counseling, but the deeper we dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about a car. It was about identity, respect, and denial. He wanted a wife who mirrored his idea of success, refined, polished, easy to explain at dinner parties, someone who made sense on paper. I needed a partner who could respect me for who I was, even when that meant stepping outside his comfort zone. 6 months after Eleanor sold the Charger, Mark and I signed the divorce papers. It was amicable, civil even. He kept the house and its freshly organized garage. I took the tools that hadn't been hauled off and moved into a place just outside Bozeman, small but quiet. It had a 2-car garage and enough space for a lift. The Charger came back to me in near-perfect condition. Morrison had gone above and beyond, stored it in climate control, had his mechanic do a full inspection, and ensured nothing had been tampered with. But I couldn't finish it. Too much had changed. The emotional thread that had tethered me to that project had frayed and snapped. Every time I looked at it, I didn't feel pride anymore, just grief. So I listed it properly, with full provenance, through Barrett Jackson. It sold for $420,000, 0 cents. And with that, I bought something I'd always dreamed of but never believed I'd own. A 1970 Plymouth Barracuda. A little rough, a little forgotten. It had sat in a barn for 3 decades, but I saw what it could be. My grandfather taught me to drive in one just like it. But this time, I wasn't building it for show or sale. I was building it for myself. Now, on weekends, I open the garage doors, turn up the music, and get to work. Tools scattered just how Grandpa taught me. Grease under my nails, a feeling of peace in every turn of the ratchet. Sometimes neighbors stop by. They ask questions, they admire the progress. A few are surprised to see a woman at the center of it all, but most are just impressed. Mark sends the occasional holiday text. I rarely reply. Mark's dating someone new now. He tells me she appreciates the finer things in life. I always text back politely, wish him well, nothing more. Eleanor and I haven't spoken since the sentencing. That silence feels like closure. Last month, Carmen stopped by to check on the progress of the 70 CUDA. She ran her hand along the freshly painted rear quarter panel, admiring the deep plum metallic that shimmered even under the dull glow of the garage fluorescents. "You know," she said, stepping back for a better view, "I think this one might turn out even better than the Charger." I smiled, wiping grease from my hands with an old flannel rag. Different goals this time. The Charger was about proving something. To the world, maybe to myself. This one's just about remembering why I loved this in the first place. "And how's that going?" she asked. I looked over at the CUDA, still months from completion but already transforming. Every curve smooth, every component placed with precision, every detail reflecting years of knowledge, heartbreak, and healing. "Better than I expected," I said. "Turns out, when you're building something for yourself instead of for someone else's approval, the work feels different, fuller." Carmen laughed. "Sounds like you learned more than just how to rebuild engines." Maybe I had. Maybe it takes someone else trying to erase your dreams to make you realize how much they mattered. And sometimes, the betrayal that nearly breaks you becomes the spark that lights the life you were always meant to build. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me, have you ever had someone try to rewrite your story for you? What did you do to take it back? Drop a comment below. Your support means more than you know. I read every word. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Build a life that feels like yours. Not for approval, not for validation, just for you. Subscribe if you believe in rebuilding after betrayal, because trust me, the road ahead is still unfolding, and I'm taking every turn with intention.